When you buy your house, do you actually know where your next buyer is coming from? Most people don't. So today, I'm going to show you how to identify where the real buyers for your property will come from in future, so you can start making better entry and exit decisions. Welcome back to another episode with me. I'm Lauren. Most owners do the same thing. They wait, they read the news headline, they hope the prices go up, and sometimes it did. Then they realize their property may have appreciated on paper, but there is no demand when they want to exit to capitalize the gain in future. So why is your property hard to exit? And why demand matters? What do I mean by demand? In 2026 alone, we are expecting around 13,000 HDB flats to reach MOP. And this piece of news is a very important indicator to what will happen next. Many of these owners will sell, a portion of them may upgrade, which means that they become buyers of private property. So here's the key question. If you are already a private property owner, does this wave of HDB upgraders automatically mean your price will go up? It depends on the profile of your clients. In the next few slides, I will walk you through a few examples and show you why it is extremely important to know that. Let's take a look at this case study in Punggol, one of the most straightforward example of an HDB upgraded town. Why do I say so? If you look at Punggol's buyer profile, the majority of private condo buyers here are not coming from other condos. They are coming from HDB upgraders. These are young families, couples who bought into their BTO early, served their MOP, capitalized on their gain, and then upgraded. A typical Singapore asset progression story. Let's take a look at this chart. The blue bars represent the transactions of new private launches, which in this context is the supply, and the red bar represents the transactions of MOP HDB flats, which forms the demand. If we go back to 2012, between 2012 to 2014, there was a period where private supply coming into Punggol was higher than the number of HDB flats reaching NOP. So during this period, you can see that the private property prices did not perform well. Not because Punggol is not popular or attractive or there is any lack of amenities, but because the supply outweighs the demand coming from the HDB sales who are looking to upgrade. Now let's look at 2017 to 2019. During this period, there were many HDB flats transactions reaching MOP, but there was almost no new private supply coming into Punggol. HDB MOP numbers remain healthy, upgrading demand continued, and during this period, private property prices rose by close to 37%. You see a very similar pattern from 2020 onwards. Private supply remained very limited. In fact, from 2022 onwards, there isn't much private supply coming in, but yet the number of HDB MOP numbers stayed strong. And what do we see here? The prices climb again during this period. So in estates like Punggol, where buyers are largely HDB upgraders, MOP supply has a direct impact on prices. Let's look at another case study in Jurong East and West Township. This is another HDB-driven market with a larger HDB population. If you are familiar with this estate, it is a very livable estate with schools, amenities, and families who grew up here tend to stick around the location even after they have sold their houses. So let's take a look at this chart. Around 2010, there was a surge in the supply of private as compared to the HDB transactions. During this period, the prices of private fell simply because there wasn't enough ready buyers to absorb the new supply until the point around 2012, where there is almost no new private supply coming in, while HDB MOP numbers remains fairly stable. At this point, we see the prices of private shot up by 200%. When supply came back, prices cooled around 2014 to 2016. The most significant shift came after 2018, from 2019 to 2022. There was very little, almost no new supply of private in Jurong East and West. At the same time, What are we seeing here is that the number of HDB MOP numbers stayed strong. With demand clearly outweighing the supply now, private home prices surged by more than 130% during this period. More recently, we can see that the private supply started coming in and the price started to stabilize. Jurong behaves very similarly to Punggol. In HDB-dominated estates, prices don't move just because the market is good. The market helps, no doubt, but prices really move when upgraded demand and the private supply lined up. So to summarize, if you stay in an estate where there is a large number of HDB flats reaching MOP, for example, this year, an estate like Punggol, which is going to have over 3,000 flats hitting MOP, you will see price growth in the private segment because at the same time, there aren't any new private launches coming up. So, upgraded demand will surpass the supply. I'm not saying that this price trend means everything. The market does not work this way. This is just one of the data that I focus on if my client asks whether or not their property can sell well in future. The quality of the exit environment matters. When more households are in a position to upgrade or can afford to upgrade, you naturally end up with a bigger pool of buyer and how big that pool is when it's time to sell. So some of you may be wondering, what if you stay in an estate with almost no HDB reaching MOP? Does it mean your condo price won't perform? The answer is no, not necessarily. In fact, I'm going to show you one specific district where private home prices perform exceptionally well, even without relying on HDB upgraders at all. Okay, just a quick pause here before we move on. If you find this content useful, do remember to subscribe to the channel because it really means a lot. And if this topic relates to your own situation, feel free to reach out via the QR code or any of my social media platforms. Alright, back to the analysis. Now, let's take a look at this district, District 15, which is your East Coast and Marine Parade. This is an important example because in District 15, there are HDB flats, but there is no meaningful pipeline of newly MOP HDB flats. And more importantly, the private transactions here do not correlate with HDB supply. Private property prices in District 15 have held up very well over time. Why is this so? Because this market is not driven by HDB upgraders. There are other factors determining the buyer's profile. Are they looking at lifestyle, a quieter enclave, or basic things like moving near schools? In District 15, the dominant buyer's profile are actually the private owners. These private-to-private owners are buyers who typically values the prestige of the location or their generational wealth who sticks within District 15 or is lifestyle-driven buyers, not MOP-driven buyers. So, in other words, even when HDB transactions are flat, private prices can still perform. And this tells us something critical. HDB MOP supply is not a universal driver of condo prices. So if you apply a Punggol-style MOP analysis to District 15, you'll get the wrong conclusion. What actually drives prices? Here's the framework to remember. Step 1. Identify your buyer profile. If your buyers are mostly HDB upgraders, MOP supply matters a lot. If your buyers are mostly private-to-private buyers, MOP supply matters much less. And step 2, a bonus step, track where your buyers come from, especially if your buyers are private-to-private owners. Let me give you a real example. One of the best-selling projects in 2025 was River Green in River Valley. River Green is situated in District 9, which is our core central district. When we look at the buyer's profile, most of the buyers were already private property owners. But this data alone is not enough. The more important question is now, where exactly are these buyers coming from? So for River Green, the buyers came from 6 different districts and the biggest group actually came from one district, which is District 19, our Punggol, Sengkang and Hougang. Why is this an important data? It means demand for River Valley projects doesn't depend only on what's happening within River Valley. If District 19 suddenly has a lot of supply, more new launches, more sellers, or many owners exiting at the same time, that can directly influence buyer demand for projects like River Green. That's why when I assess whether a project can sell well in the future, I don't look at just the area itself. I look at where the buyers are upgrading from and what other choices they have and how competitive these options are. This kind of data isn't readily available, so it is important to check whether the agents or professionals that you are working with actually have access to this in-depth on-the-ground data and whether they know how to interpret properly. In summary, most people only focus on today's prices or what's in the headline to determine their property value. Very few actually pause to think about where demand will come from the future, 3 to 5 years down the road. And that's the real difference between a property that has paper gain only and one that is actually easy to sell when the time comes. If this way of looking at the resale demand is useful to you, you can join my Telegram channel where I share market updates, upcoming supply, price shift, and my analysis. And if you are currently holding on to a property or thinking of buying one, but you're unsure of who your future buyers might be, feel free to drop me a message. I'm happy to walk through it with you. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Bye!